Hello, I'm Guy Kawasaki. I'm the Chief Evangelist of Canva, a Mercedes-Benz brand ambassador, and creator of a podcast called Remarkable People. The topic of this video is the art of perseverance, surviving the pandemic. At the risk of PTSD, I mentally revisited my stint at Apple when it was flailing and failing in the 1990s. Also, I've had many ups and downs with companies that I've led, advised, and invested in. I use these experiences to craft this video. All this said, I haven't been through anything of this severity, and I doubt that most people have. This video isn't about pixie dust and unicorns. It's about grit and courage and do-or-die decisions. We can't defeat a virus with bluster, machismo, and fake news, but we can mitigate its impact by making wise, albeit tough, decisions. Here are my top 10 tips for persevering in this pandemic. Number 1, run the right race. This is not a sprint, it's a marathon. It's not 100 yards, it's miles and miles and months, perhaps even years and years. An even better metaphor is that it's a decathlon because it takes multiple skills to survive. Number 2, focus on cash. Cash is king, queen, prince, and princess. Perseverance is not about perceptions and images. Perseverance is about surviving. Think about this. The iPad that Apple announced a few weeks ago is now discounted on Amazon. Wrap your mind around that. Number 3, cut deeper than you think you should. The rising tide floats all boats, but the falling tide affects big boats the most. My experience is that people, in hindsight, regret not reacting fast enough and tough enough. It's better to look back and say, I cut too much and left money on the table, then I should have done more, but I didn't, so we died. With the former, at least you're still in business. With the latter, you are gone. Number 4, go direct. You cannot depend on multiple tiered distribution. Imagine if Amazon decided your product wasn't essential and delayed fulfillment. Or if your resellers aren't even open to accept your product, much less sell it. You should be so lucky that your biggest problem is that your channel partners, assuming they're still around, resent that you did business directly. Number 5, tap your customer base. The easiest people to sell to are the people that you've sold to before. If you have a good product or service, you can tap dance all the way to the bank. Number 6, don't depend on white knights and silver bullets, especially politicians. Magical, forgiven loans from the government aren't going to suddenly materialize. If you get a loan, hallelujah, take it and run. But don't depend on help from the government unless you're a large restaurant chain, an investment bank, or an airline. A cogent business strategy is never, and then the miracle will occur. Number 7, be transparent with your employees. If there was ever a time to be transparent with your employees, it is now, because everyone is suffering. It's not like you're going to tell them something that they haven't read about or heard from their friends, families, and colleagues. Also, lying and shading takes a lot of time and energy, and you have none of either to spare. That said, a leader can never have a bad day. A leader's role is to provide a calm, rational, honest, and empathetic model, even if you have to fake it. I never saw Steve Jobs have a bad day. Number 8, give to get. You're asking a lot of your employees, so give a lot. The currency that you have is stock. Using stock is not going to affect your cash balance. I hope you end up in a situation where you say, I should not have offered so much equity, because it means you're still alive. That's a lot better than owning 100% of a dead company. Number 9, evaluate your supply chain. Stuff made locally doesn't need to be shipped. Robots don't get sick. Maybe paying a little more is worth not being subject to the whims of trade wars, much less pandemics. So examine your supply chain and see if you can simplify and control more of it. Number 10, do the crap that you never had time to do. Establish and document new processes and procedures. Upgrade technology. Learn new skills such as video conferencing, making videos, and remote everything. This is the time to do the yucky stuff that you never had time to do before. Number 11 is a bonus. Ask the question, therefore what? What will this pandemic change and how will it create opportunities?
Hi, I'm Amber Mack, and thank you so much for joining me today. We are so excited for a conversation that we're going to have with Guy Kawasaki on the art of perseverance. Guy did a video that many of you probably just saw because we played a good portion of that talked about 10 things that you can do right now to persevere during COVID-19 and beyond. But let's hear from the guy himself. Hello, Guy Kawasaki.
Hi, Amber. How's my favorite Canadian?
I was wondering if I was still your favorite Canadian, so I appreciate hearing that.
It's tough to narrow down. There's so many great Canadians.
Yes, there are many great Canadians, and we love that you love our country. I do want to encourage people who are watching right now who have questions to please leave us your questions. We'll either put them up on the screen and try to answer them or answer them after the show. Now, Guy, you sent me a video that you did about the art of perseverance. You probably thought I would just watch it and then it would go away, but I thought it was so fantastic. Before we get into the 10 tips that you recommended, can you talk a little bit about why you decided to do this video?
Well, first of all, Amber, when I sent it to you, I had absolutely no intention that all you would do is watch it. What's happening now is exactly why I sent it. Are you freaking kidding me?
Smart guy.
So I made that video because I think that so much of the advice or lack of advice is hurting small businesses. And in particular, I read this article that said, even in this pandemic, you have to maintain your lofty branding and positioning, and don't discount your product, don't trash on your brand. And I looked at that, I said, that's the stupidest thing I ever heard. I mean, Apple iPads that are recently announced are on sale, and Dyson vacuum cleaners are on sale, and you think that you can't put your stuff on sale? That's ridiculous.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I think one of the things that I really appreciated in this video is one of the lines off the top where you said that this is not pixie dust and unicorns. So maybe you can dive into that a little bit.
Well, I think so much of the advice you read on the internet is kind of like, yoga-induced, airy-fairy, hippie, Bergenstock, CBD based. I mean, this is a pandemic. This is life and death, not just for human life and death, but life and death for organizations. So, yes, I'm a keynote speaker, but being a keynote speaker is not just going on stage and say, believe in yourself, and look to the person to your right and look to the person to your left and tell them that you believe in them. I mean, that's not the nature of real life. Of course, these days, if you look to your right and look to your left, one of you may be gone. It's pretty soon. So let's just get down to brass tacks and no more pixie dust and unicorns.
Well, I think that's one of the things that I have always loved about all of your writing and your speeches is that it feels very practical and accessible. And I think that's one of the things I really noticed in terms of these 10, well, actually 11 tips that you have because there's a bonus. And I know people probably have questions, but before we get into some questions, I wanted to talk about 5 of the tips that I thought were especially pertinent right now. And the first one I thought was interesting when you talk about how people have to run the right race. Can you dive into that?
Yes. So starting from the top of the American political system, I think that some people think this is a sprint. 100 meters, 100-yard dash, Usain Bolt, it's over in 9 or 10 seconds. But this is not a sprint. It is a marathon. It's going to take weeks and weeks, if not months and months, if not years and years. And so there's a difference between Usain Bolt's perspective on life and a marathoner's perspective on life. It is about pacing and a different kind of training and I think a different level of pain. I'm not Usain Bolt, but I don't think he experiences the kind of pain and pushing through a wall that a marathoner does. Like, at the 6-second mark, Usain Bolt is pushing through the wall as opposed to the 25th mile. So it's very important that people understand this is a marathon. And I could also kind of contradict myself and say maybe even a better metaphor than marathon is decathlon, because to succeed and to survive in this time, it's not simply long distance running. It's 9 other events. It's pole vaulting, and it's high jumping, and it's all the other things. It's not simply running, but it certainly isn't only a sprint.
Now, Guy, I wasn't really going to get into this, but I feel as though we have to, because when you say this, it's so clear and obvious to me. I believe in science and research and evidence, and yet we live in a world right now where some people think, oh, this is overblown, it's not a big deal. So in that situation, without getting you too angry, what do you say to those people who think that this is an overblown problem?
Oh my God! This is the $64 billion question, right? So I don't think everybody who believes that this pandemic is not a pandemic, that it's not serious, that the infection rate is no worse than the flu, that the death rate is no worse than the flu. I think they've just been misinformed and misled. So it's not their fault per se, but science, the truth, a thermometer, a swab is not liberal or Democrat. It's not conservative. It's not Republican. It's not Democrat. A swab is a swab. And, a blood test is a blood test. You either have the antigens and you have the antibodies, or you don't. And just saying, we're in a war and I want you to be warriors and not wear masks and go out there and, start spending money again, that makes like zero sense. The virus doesn't care. The virus is not a thinking thing. All it wants to do is get into an organism and replicate.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And yet we live in this time, I think, where people are having a hard time believing that this is a situation that's going to go on for some time. And that really kind of brings us to the next point that I think is really key right now. You talk about focus on cash, but you follow that up with a comment in number 3 that says that business owners should cut deeper than they think they should. So let's dive into that.
Yeah, well, so at the risk of some PTSD, as I said, I remember my days at Apple going through the layoffs and, John Scully gets fired, Steve Jobs gets fired, the end of the world is coming. And I've also invested in, led, and advised many startups that ran short of cash, that kind of thing. And most of the time when people look back, they say, if I had cut deeper and if I had conserved cash, I might still be here today. But at the time, as a CEO or a decision maker, what goes through your mind is, it's very painful to furlough, fire, or let go of people, right? So you're trying to avoid that as much as possible, not only because of the negative effect on the person, but it's just a painful thing to do. And so you go down the slippery slope of, these are A players. We've spent so much time and effort training them. They get it. We know this isn't going to be permanent. So when it turns around, we'll have to find more A players, and then we'll have to train them. And then, so we're going to lose all this progress. So why don't we just cut as little as we think is necessary? And then when it turns around, we'll be in good shape. So that's plan A. Plan B, which is what I think, is, you cut deeper than you think you ever should, because I think at the end of this, if you had, simplifying this a lot, if you had 2 choices where you say, oh, I wish I had not cut so deep. I have foregone revenue because I cut people, I cut products, I cut programs. And so there's that regret of, lack of optimization or lack of maximization. The other scenario is, I wish I had cut more. I was naive. It went on longer than I thought. So now my company is dead. So if you had those 2 choices, I think the better thing to regret is to have cut too deep than to have cut not enough, and now you're dead.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And I think you're right. I think also you kind of alluded to this in the video, but it was my impression that you believe that people have to also act quickly. I mean, it did feel to me in the early days, and I don't know how you feel about this, as though many people thought, okay, I'm just going to wait this out for a few weeks and then I'll react. And that seems like a pretty big mistake.
Yeah, I think it's a huge mistake. And let's face it, that I don't know if there's ever going to be a normal, but it's certainly not the case that we're going to have a miracle vaccine come January. I mean, this would be the first time in the history of medical science that a vaccine was created in such a short time. And there is a chance that some of these drugs that are already on the market can ameliorate the effects of catching the coronavirus. But I don't think there's any miracle vaccine that's going to help. And so I like knowing that, I mean, that should influence your behavior. No, I mean, what am I missing?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it also leads to another point that you had about people, especially leaders, who need to be transparent. And I love that you mentioned a comment about Steve Jobs, and you said that Steve Jobs never really had a bad day. And I just would love to hear more about that.
Well, that's focusing on the second half of what I said. But the first thing I said in that point was that if there ever was a time to be transparent, now is the time, because it has much less downside to be transparent. So, in a rising tide and you're having problems, cash flow, et cetera, I could make the case that, if you tell your employees, listen, it's a great time for everybody except us. We're running out of cash, we're having problems. Then what happens is your employees, they look for other opportunities. They go into a deep funk because their colleagues are all doing well and they're buying Ferraris and all that. But, you're in a deep funk. But now everybody's in a deep funk. So when everybody's in a deep funk, you can be more transparent, telling employees exactly what's happening, because it's not as if you tell your employees, we're running out of cash, we're going to have to discount our product line, we're going to have to turn inventory into cash, and then they go home or they go someplace. Well, they can't go someplace, but they talk to their friends, and their friends say, wow, that's not happening to us. We can barely keep things in stock, and we're thinking of price raises, and we just got a new foosball table. I mean, that ain't happening. So I'm telling you that now you can be transparent. The little nuance I added is you can be transparent. You can tell your employees that, things are in the shitter, but you still, as the CEO, you cannot have a bad day. You cannot be in this deep funk that drags everybody else down, because you are the symbol. And to use a political example, if Trudeau or Trump really had a bad day and went and had a press conferences like, oh my God, I don't know what to do. I mean, we don't have enough masks, we don't have enough testing, we don't have this. I don't know what to do, and tax revenue is down. I mean, oh my God, if that ever happened, truly, it would be a self-fulfilling prophecy. And I think the same thing is true of a company, that you can be transparent but still optimistic and still show a direction forward.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's fair. I want to get into a couple of more points, but I do think it's worth taking a couple of questions that have just come in on Facebook. And there is a question here from Pierre Benson. And Pierre asks, we know that out of every crisis comes opportunity. For example, great and successful companies sometimes get established during a crisis. Mm-hmm. Can you talk a little bit about that? And I do think you alluded to that as well in the video.
Yes. So two things. It's been my experience that great companies are born during bad times, and great companies are proven during bad times. Because, in a rising tide, anybody in any dinghy or canoe or kayak can float. But it's in the tough times that you separate the great companies from the lousy ones. So that's statement number one. And statement number two is that I don't know what opportunities this pandemic will bring. But the question you should ask is the question that I pose. I'm going to touch my face. I know that's wrong. The question is, therefore what? And the way this works is, you look at what's happening and you develop some kind of insight or analysis, and then you say, all right, so this is happening, therefore what? What's the opportunities? So I use a historical example, more positive, is 15 years ago when you figured out that phones would have cameras and they'd all be connected so you could share pictures, you ask yourself, well, therefore what? And an answer would be, why don't we start Instagram? Because phones are going to all be out there on the internet with cameras. So now you have to look at this pandemic and you have to say to yourself, well, so, people aren't going to travel as much. They're not going to be wanting to go in airplanes. They're not wanting to sit in a hospital or medical facility waiting room next to somebody who might have a lethal virus. Kids are not going to be able to go to school in person. And so you look at all these things and you say, well, therefore what? And the example I use in my video, which is kind of a silly example, but I think it's a humorous illustration of the concept, is there's a animal rescue farm in Half Moon Bay, about an hour from my house, called Sweet Farm. And so Sweet Farm offers something called Goat to Meeting. Not go to meeting, goat. Like, goat to meeting. And so what you can do is you can book a llama or a cow or a rooster or whatever to appear in your Zoom company meeting. And it's just a way of adding some levity and some humor and some brightness to, probably a boring Zoom meeting. And so, my fantasy is that the people at Sweet Farm said, okay, everybody's having these boring Zoom meetings, therefore what? Why don't we offer that you can have a llama in your meeting? Now, I don't expect everybody to start cloning Goat to Meeting, but that's the kind of thinking that will help you not only survive, but thrive.
Absolutely. It's absolutely so clever. We have a few more questions coming in. One here from Baron on Facebook that says, what guidance and thinking would you offer for young employees beginning their career or even college students?
Yeah, I hope this is not Baron Trump, but
it is not. I know this, Baron, so we're good.
Well, as an aside, we'll know it's safe when Baron Trump is working as a busboy as Mar-a-Lago. Okay, until then, wash your hands and shelter in place. But anyway, that's an aside. So my daughter is an graduating high school senior, incoming freshman. Her school system, Cal State University, has just decided that all things are going to be virtual, at least for the first half of the year. And so, what does a college student, what does a young person do? And in the good news or the bad news is it's going to be harder to find a job, internships, et cetera, et cetera. The good news is that that's going to be universal. So it's not going to be like there's a rising tide and all my friends have jobs at Goldman Sachs for the summer and Accenture for the summer and Apple and Google and Facebook. But I'm the loser who can't get an internship. No one's going to get an internship. So I think what you have to do is you have to kind of, like I told my daughter, call up this company that she interned with last year called Merge 4. Merge 4 makes the best socks in the world. And I said, call up the CEO, she's probably laying people off and furloughing, and say you will work for free because you don't care. It's going to be just so much better to say after this pandemic is under control that, my entire college experience was changed because I registered, but I was taking classes online. So I didn't just take classes online and, sit around and make TikToks the rest of the day. I also had an internship at Merge 4 running Merge 4's or managing or doing Merge 4's social media. So I had on-the-job experience while I was getting a virtual education during a pandemic. That's a pretty good story, right?
Absolutely.
So I think if you're young and, I wish I had a magic way to say, okay, so this is how you can make money. But I don't. But at least when someone looks at your LinkedIn profile 2 or 3 years from now, it would be better to stand out by saying, not only was I getting an education in terms of education, but I was also getting a real world education by having this experience. So I am more qualified than people who just sat around and played Fortnite all day.
Absolutely. I mean, it really brings up another question I have for you, which is about the future of work. We've seen companies like Twitter announce that people may be able to work from home forever within that organization. How do you think COVID-19 is going to change the workplace?
Yeah, I think it's going to be a fundamental change in people's expectations as well as companies. Now, I don't know how to predict what that change is, but I think that many people are saying, wow, I got back 2 hours a day in my life. And, wow, I didn't have to have, like, we're having 0 face-to-face analog meetings right now, right? And it used to be that you thought, oh, yeah, well, so generally I have to have a face-to-face meeting. It's more effective, eye contact and blah, blah, blah. But, well, lo and behold, Zoom works even without a llama. And so I think people's expectations of what can be done remotely and online are going to be much, much higher. And I also think that companies will notice, and it'd be interesting to see when companies do an analysis to say, okay, so the downside was, maybe less social interaction. The upside was, well, we have now less office space. We need less parking lots. We need less free food in the cafeteria. Employees are happier because they get 2 hours a day back in their lives from commuting. So they were more productive. We were more productive. Now, if you're Apple and you're a hardware company, what do you do? I mean, do certain iPhone hardware engineers take home the secret iPhone prototype that's, iPhone 15 and then their kid picks it up one day and does a TikTok and say, yeah, my father works at Apple and here's the new iPhone 15. Well, okay, that's one more termination. But I think it's all going to be changed.
Yeah, I think you're right. And Guy, I don't want to take up too much of your time, but I have at least 3 or 4 more questions, including some from LinkedIn.
I got till January for you, Amber.
Awesome. Okay, so we have a question here from Jeff from LinkedIn who says, quote, therefore what is a terrific question and much easier to answer in hindsight. Do you have any, right, it's a good comment. Do you have any criteria or insight for evaluating new ideas, what to launch and what to potentially shelf?
Well, I mean, he's absolutely right. The way it works in Silicon Valley is we throw a lot of shit up against the wall. Some of the shit sticks, and then we go and we point the bullseye around the shit that's stuck, and we say, we hit the bullseye. Of course we hit the bullseye. It's easy to hit the bullseye if you paint the bullseye after you see what's stuck. That's why it's easier to be a podcaster and a writer than it is to be an employee. But having said that, so what are some tests? Well, I think one test is, would you use the product? So that's a very interesting question because many people in product development, they ask themselves, would our potential customer use the product? So they're trying to put themselves in the place. I mean, the worst case example is old, white, bald men are designing products for young women, right? So, would my daughter use this product? That's such an ass-backward question. You have no idea what's going through your daughter's mind. So I think what you should do is you should ask yourself if you would use the product. So, Wozniak asked if he would use an Apple One, not if a Fortune 500 MIS director would use an Apple One. And so ask yourself, basically I'm saying build the product that you want to use and then hope that you're not the only nutcase in the world who wants to use it. That sounds like a facetious test, but I think that is the test for most high-tech startups. Most high-tech startups did not start with this grand vision of market domination based on, highfalutin studies. Woz and Steve built the computer they wanted to use. I might make the case that Larry and Sergey built the search engine they wanted to use. Canva, I'm chief evangelist of Canva, so Melanie and Cliff created Canva because that's the graphic design system they wanted to use. So I think that's the richest vein. a second reality check, and not to be sexist or anything, but I think when you have an idea for a product or service, you should ask women, because I think women have much better judgment about what is viable as a product or service than men, because I think men are predisposed to wanting to compete and kill things. So if you ask a man, should I create a competitor to Adobe Photoshop? Every man will always say yes, because men want to kill things. So, I mean, look right now in the world, look at the countries that are doing well with the pandemic. New Zealand, who runs New Zealand? Not a man. So ask women about the product or service.
Yeah, you have always been a great champion of women, so I definitely appreciate that comment. We have another question from LinkedIn as well, and this question is from Charlie that says, do you think appreciation of FANG stocks reflects new post-COVID realities, or are we in a tech bubble again?
So if I'm interpreting right, so, Apple is doing okay, certainly eBay is doing okay, Instacart is going to do okay, Amazon is doing great, right? Because can I just confess to you, Amber? I swear, every day I buy something from Amazon. I mean, literally every day. And I use these news readers, Amber, and every day there's an article like 50 things under $50 that are going to change your life. I buy stuff like, stretchable plastic covers to cover bowls. And I bought a new wet vacuum cleaner that, sucks up pet poop and stuff. And I bought a thing for scooping honey out. And I bought a stainless steel bowl where the cover is a certain color that matches the bottom, so you know exactly which cover goes with which bowl. Brilliant. I mean, I just love that kind of shit. And I swear, I buy that every day now. And I think now that these newsreaders know that I love Gear Patrol and I love these, real simple 20 gadgets under your life, under $20 that's going to make your life better. So now my feed has even more of them, right? So the algorithm has figured out, guy always clicks through on these. So anyway, we're going kind of down a rat hole. But anyway, so, I mean, how do you argue against Amazon today? I don't want to I have not been into a store in 8 weeks. I use Instacart with my wife once a week for groceries. I don't foresee this situation where I'm going to go, gleefully into Safeway and stand in line in the near future. So I think this passed the test of, invest or create what you want to use. I want to use Instacart. I want to use Amazon. I don't, I know I can arrange for my package to be ready of what I want inside Ace Hardware, and I don't want to go into Ace Hardware because I don't want to ever look back and say, guy, you went to Ace and you got that special light bulb or screwdriver, and you don't know for sure, but you caught coronavirus and now you're on intubator. I mean, how do you? Why didn't you just freaking buy it from Amazon and leave the package out for 24 hours in the sun and you would have your light bulbs and you wouldn't have coronavirus? So that's what goes through my mind. Maybe I'm paranoid.
No, I think it makes sense in many ways. And that kind of leads me to my next question, because I meant to ask you this off the top of our conversation. But as your friend and someone who is also a fan of yours, how is Guy Kawasaki? What goes on with your speaking career? Does it just mean that you get to surf more?
Yeah, well, for the first 8 weeks, I didn't surf at all because I was sheltering in place at our house that's not near the water. So that's the longest I haven't been surfing since I started surfing. So that was just freaking killing me. And I started paddling my board in my pool just to keep paddling for a while. So Guy Kawasaki, I used to speak 40, 50 times a year. We probably spoke about the same amount, and it's gone from 50 to 0, right? So there's no in-person event right now, but virtual conferences are now kicking in. So I'm probably doing between 2 and 4 virtual conferences a month, and I don't know about these other speakers, but I listened to a conference where the guy said, yeah, so, I charge 70% of what I charge in person. And I said, man, hallelujah, man, I am not worthy, man. If you can get 70% of what you usually get for being in person online, I'm not worthy, man. I salute you. So I don't know about you, Amber, but I get probably 25%. So if I charge X to be in person, I charge 0.25X virtually. And well, for that, I just have to remember to put pants on and turn on these lights, and I give a presentation. I think giving an online presentation is obviously the logistics are much easier. No flying, no nothing, and all that. But it's harder to be kind of a good, charismatic, uplifting keynote speaker virtually because you have no feedback. I'm staring into 3 sets of lights right here. I have to discipline myself so I don't look down at the picture, which is my natural inclination. I have to look up at the camera over there. So there are those challenges. So yeah, so I'm picking up virtual speeches. My income is not going to be anywhere close what it usually is, but it's not zero. And I don't eat out, so my food bill is a lot less. And what are you going to do? I mean, compared to most of the world, I am very, very fortunate. First of all, I'm not sick, so I'm very fortunate. I'm counting my blessings, and I've become closer to my family than ever because what choice did we have? It was either become closer or kill each other. So
You're good.
It is what it is.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, I'm in a similar boat, probably did 40, 50 events a year. Switching to virtual, I'd probably say 20 to 30% of my typical fee is what I get for a virtual event. But I couldn't agree more with you. That's okay with me. I'm happy to be working, and it is easier. I've spent hundreds of nights, if not more, sitting in hotel rooms alone. So the fact that I can do a virtual event and then go back to my family is amazing, and I will always have gratitude for that. And there's no price that can make up for that time at home. So I love that piece of it.
When do you think is the next time you're going to catch an airplane? Not a private plane, but go to Toronto Airport and get on a plane. When do you think that'll be?
So this is really interesting. I have had probably 25 events get postponed. One of them is for a healthcare event that was supposed to take place in Las Vegas, and they have officially moved it to Chicago the first week of August. It's quite a large event. But here's the question I have right now, which is the border going to be even open, right? That's one. Two, do I really want, or can I go? I mean, if I have to go to these events and then come home and isolate for 2 weeks away from my family, I mean, that'll just never stop. That could go on for years and years and years. Yeah. So,
but there is no way that people are going to fly to Chicago in August. Do you think? I wouldn't.
I'm shocked. I'm absolutely shocked. But they moved the event and rescheduled it, and everybody has been moved to that date. So I'm on the same page as you. And remember, you're obviously in the U.S. and we're here in Canada, and we're being very cautious in Canada. And for the most part, there is tremendous trust in government. So people do listen to what our federal, provincial, and municipal governments say. So they actually pay attention, and they are safe. So here our concern, I think, in many ways, especially for those of us speaking in the U.S., is that the U.S. doesn't necessarily share those same values everywhere.
To put it mildly. Well, let me ask you something, because this is a real-world question. So is there pickup hockey now in Canada?
I thought you were going to get super deep with me, Guy.
No, this is super deep, because pickup hockey, you're in a small locker room, you're sitting next to each other on a bench, and the whole point of hockey is to, get the puck away from the other person and score. So, like with surfing, you're not trying to get close to the other surfer, right? But with hockey, if you're playing defense, you're trying to get closer and get the puck. So is there pickup hockey now in Canada?
No. I mean, not that I know of anywhere. I mean, if you look at sports right now across the country, the only things are individual or independent sports, such as golfing. You can golf alone in some provinces. Starting this week, I believe in Ontario, you can play tennis. But again, I mean, our guidelines are pretty rigid, and people have been, for the most part, adhering to them. And actually, I would love to just leave you with the most difficult question of the day, which is a concern of mine. What is going to happen to America?
You mean in general?
During this time, I don't know if it's my paranoia living in Canada, but I'm seeing the number of people protesting who want their freedom back, who aren't adhering to guidelines. The government obviously is in disarray. You have a leader who is appearing to kind of fall apart. I don't know. What's your perception?
Amber, you're exaggerating, Amber. Life is make America great again, Amber. There's going to be a vaccine in January. We're going to open everything up. The economy will be right back. Trump will get reelected. What? Like, Amber, you are watching the wrong news sources. You're watching fake news, man. Things are great here. What, are you kidding me? I don't know what's going to happen with America. The first thing we have to face, and it's going to be very interesting in a few weeks, is what happens to the states who are in denial of science and opened up, right? So what happens to Georgia and Wisconsin? They're all like sharing brewskis right now because the Supreme Court of Wisconsin said that, you can't enforce this shelter in place. So everybody's, hanging out in Wisconsin. What is going to happen? Are the scientists right and there's a second wave, or are the deniers right and this was a hoax? I don't know. I wouldn't go into a bar right now. And so there's that. But there's another factor which makes it even more complicated. So back when there was an earthquake in California, and this was, it must have been 25 years ago. So my wife and I were in Kauai because, if you have to be in an earthquake, you should be in Kauai. So we were in Kauai. There was a big earthquake in San Francisco, and I think about 30 people died, which is tragic. But, if you're watching CNN in Kauai of the San Francisco earthquake, you think, oh my God, San Francisco has burned down. And then we come home, and really it was, like a 2 square block area in San Francisco where all the fires were. There was a freeway that fell down on the East Bay, and lots of people died. I mean, lots being 30 or 50. But it wasn't San Francisco is burning down. Mm-hmm. And so I remember that distinctly, that like what a difference between the perception of news versus when you get there and you see, what the reality is. And so now I look at this and I hope, so we see nothing but 50 people with automatic rifles in the Michigan State House, and we see a video from a bar in Wisconsin where nobody has a mask and they're all sitting elbow to elbow drinking beer. And is that CNN just taking the worst case and making it seem like all of Wisconsin is hanging out? Is all of Michigan with their automatic weapons protesting, or is this just the 200 people supported by, white nationalists or whatever? Is this a tiny, tiny bit, or is it the whole thing? I don't know. I'm not going to go to Michigan to find out. So, let's just hope that most people believe in science and most people will shelter in place. And, it would kind of be okay if you want to protest and you don't want to take the vaccine and all that, fine. If you're just affecting yourself, I would understand that. And you could even make the case, you're making a conscious decision, you could affect people that you live with. That's not as fine, but okay. But my problem is, you do a dumbass thing like that, and then you go to a hospital and you infect a nurse or an x-ray tech or a doctor. Now you're pissing me off, right? Because now you're affecting innocent people's lives. You're affecting the Safeway clerk, the Instacart driver, the Uber driver, just because, I don't know, you want to protest this. That's where it gets kind of
Yeah,
Just
absolutely. I mean, I asked the question just because the numbers in terms of deaths are staggering, and
yeah.
you know, it's pushing closer and closer to 100,000 people in the U.S. Every week. So, nonetheless, I do want to end. There's no positive note to ending this, but I do want to ask you one final question, and this is a question about perseverance, because I'm just really curious. Before I let you go, do you think someone can learn how to persevere, or do they have to be born with that?
Oh, I think almost everything is a learned behavior. I mean, whether that's evangelism, sales, I think perseverance is thrust upon you. I mean, I don't think anybody wakes up in the morning saying, "Shit, I wish my life were harder so I could learn to be perseverance." Right? I think perseverance is thrust upon you, and you don't know how strong and able to grit it out and grind it out that you are. I think the human spirit rises to the occasion. Now, this doesn't mean that everybody has perseverance, but I think most people have the ability to persevere. You don't have to be Steve Jobs to persevere. And I think you will find examples of perseverance that are absolutely shocking. And I mean that in a positive way, that you would think that, how can this 103-year-old woman who got coronavirus, and she gutted it out and survived and refused to give up. I mean, I think perseverance is something you learn. It's not bequeathed upon you. And I could actually make the opposite case, that the lack of perseverance is something you're born with. So,
well, I think though that, I think it's a good note to end on, because I think one of the things that I noticed just watching the video that you did on the art of perseverance is that much of what you talked about was learned over the years and from experience. And I think, if anything, if we can end this conversation on a note that makes people feel hopeful, it is that now is the time to really take what you've learned and go out there, persevere, do your best, try hard. Some people say, oh, well, now is not the time to work. We shouldn't focus on productivity. I feel exactly the opposite way. I think now's the time to figure stuff out, because if you don't now, it's not going to get better.
Well, one thing in the video was it was like number 10, which is, do all the shit you never had time to do before. So now's the time to do all the shit. And whether it's putting new systems into place, whether it's writing documentation, whether it's learning to do videos, whether it's, whatever skills, learn a new language, whatever it is. I mean, if you're getting 2 hours back a day, don't just sit around playing Fortnite all day, although, maybe Fortnite is a skill too. So, at the end of the day, if you're not trying to persevere, if you're not trying to make things better and learn new skills, or polish old skills, then essentially you're just giving up. And if you're just giving up and you're saying, well, so, my strategy is that there's going to be a monthly, universal basic income, and then there's going to be a vaccine in January, and we're going to make America great again, and we're going to go back to fossil fuels, and coal is the new, renewable energy source. Boy, I don't think any of that's going to happen. So, in a sense, this pandemic means that, you have no choice but to persevere. There is no other choice. You can just give up and die, I guess. But, I think this is going to be we're going to look back 20 years from now and say, wow, that was a turning point in the history of the world.
Yeah. Absolutely. Guy, I said I had no more questions, but someone on Facebook earlier asked me to ask you who your second favorite Canadian is.
My second favorite Canadian. Well, let's see. Oh, man. How about Patrick Lohr? Patrick Lohr is the co-founder of Istockphoto. He lives in Calgary, and I'll tell you a story about Patrick Lohr and his co-founder, Bruce Livingston. So they founded, are you familiar with Istockphoto?
Yeah, absolutely, from way back in the day.
Yeah, so Istockphoto was democratizing stock photography. So they sold photos for, I don't know, $20 when everybody else was $400, right? So I met Patrick at a Banff Venture Capital conference, and the reason why we got into a conversation was because of hockey, and we're talking about skates, and the company that makes great skates called Graph is in Calgary, and so we got this whole conversation. I sold him some skates so I could buy some graphs and all that. Anyway, so we became friends, and then I was speaking a lot back then, and so he said, how about being an advisor for Istockphoto? I said, okay, and so I would go around the country telling everybody about this great photo sharing, photo service, stock photo service, and we never came to a literal legal agreement because Canadian equity rules are so complex and tax is so complex. And so we never came to a written agreement. And then they sold the company to Getty. And so Patrick and Bruce said, we never came to any agreement. I said, well, yeah, I know, but, I guess shame on me for not having an agreement. I said, no, so, what would you have gotten as an advisor if we had gotten together and, dotted our I's and crossed our T's? And I said, well, there's kind of fundamentally three kinds of advisors. There's Jerry Maguire, who's, show me the money, all the connections. There's Marcus Welby, the mom or dad who's like a psychiatrist and advisor and been there and done that. And then there's the, sort of hard ass who just tells you, you're screwed, you're doing this wrong, whatever. And frankly, I'm all three. And so they said, well, what would an advisor get? I said, I don't know, like, I don't know, a tenth of a point, a quarter point, whatever together. And they said, okay, so or half a point each for each advisor, right? So 0.5%. And I said, well, I was all three. They said, okay, since you're all three, we're going to give you 1.5% of the purchase price of Istockphoto from our gains. So they took money from their part of the 50 million and gave me 1.5% of 50 million. And I never forgot that because, my God, I mean, talk about honor. And that's like, only a Canadian would do that. Although an American, Steve Case, did something similar. So anyway, it's a very long answer to my favorite two Canadians are Amber MacArthur and Patrick Lord.
Well, I can't give you stock in anything, but I'll always have you on my live broadcast. How about that?
I just want donuts and maple syrup. That's all I need.
Perfect. The shipment is on its way. All right, Guy. Well, I should let you go, but I just want to say thank you so much for your time. Thank you for doing that video. People can check it out on LinkedIn, on YouTube. It's on Twitter. I've seen it all over the place. And it's called The Art of Perseverance. It's really an easy, digestible video to watch if you're wondering what you should be doing right now. And as always, it has that clear and concise messaging that Guy Kawasaki is so famous for. So thank you for being here.
Oh, can I plug one more thing?
Yes.
My podcast. People should subscribe to my podcast.
Yes, your podcast, which we have a screenshot of that up here too, actually, the Remarkable People podcast, which you've had. I mean, it's amazing because I thought you were going to stop after 10 episodes and it just keeps going.
Well, I just got on a roll, and Amber, you deserve a lot of credit for this because you helped get me You helped me get Margaret Atwood. So in the first month, I had something like Margaret Atwood and Jane Goodall.
It was awesome.
I mean, how much better can it get than that?
That's true. No, it is an awesome podcast. I subscribe, and you can get it on all of the podcast stores. And it's amazing to see you continue to get just some of the. I would say you have probably the best roster of guests of any podcast that I've seen online.
Thank you, Amber. I think so too.
Right?
Elon Musk has not come on it and smoked marijuana with me, but it truly is a collection of remarkable people. And, MacArthur Award winners, as opposed to Amber MacArthur, like Steve Wolfram, who invented Mathematica, Steve Wozniak, Steven Pinker, Sir Ken Robinson. I mean, I would put my guest list up against anybody, including NPR.
I agree. It's phenomenal. So people should download that podcast. Right now, it's something to listen to during the long weekend, and it doesn't cost you anything, which is also a good thing for podcasting. Awesome, Guy. I'm giving you a huge virtual hug, and I hope that I get to see you in person one day soon when it's safe to do so, which who knows when that will be.
All right. Take care.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thanks, Guy. And thanks to everybody who has watched across all social media sites, whether it's Twitter, LinkedIn, or Facebook. Thanks for all your comments and questions. I'll get a chance to read back through them in a little bit. And please share this video. Please subscribe to Guy's podcast. Check out the video that he's done on the art of perseverance. And thank you so much for joining me today. Have a safe weekend, and I'll see you soon.